also to share our experiences. Thank you. So I know we all know about corporate governance and what it is, right? But one of the most important things that we need to know is specifically where we locate ourselves as in this case, as I don't want to say as teachers or professors of corporate governance, more like, you know, what is exactly how we are providing this training, how we are the facilitators of that. Because depending on my experience is that whenever I've been teaching corporate governance, then this is like a big bag of things and topics that you need to talk about. Sometimes, and this is something very important, most of the people that you're going to be teaching whenever you teach corporate governance are going to be people with a long experience, like either executive, former, already directors, or aspiring directors, or a company that is looking to put together a board. So you need to know specifically what kind of, I mean, we're going to be talking about that later, but you need to know exactly what is that you're going to be teaching them and what are the key goals of what you're going to be teaching them. Because, for instance, on my side, or my take, teaching anything about finances or, you know, anything related with finance would be a totally impossible task, right? I mean, I'm not into finance, and I mean, I would try to put together something for that, but essentially I need to know that I'm going to go for the softer part of corporate governance before trying to say yes to this kind of trainings. So essential, I know we all know what is corporate governance, but it's essential to know what is exactly that they want you to be teaching, or they want you to be facilitating. Either, you know, an overall introduction to corporate governance, what is the impact of corporate governance, or the need of corporate governance, or, you know, whether they're going to be asking you about board structure, shareholder rights, whatever, right? In my case, most of my teaching has been on something that is very specific, that is either on the ESG side, sustainability, diversity and inclusion, or board composition, or sometimes about the regulatory framework of companies. It's important for that because for some of these topics, you might need a specific background that is not an economics background, that is my background. You might need, I don't know, you might need to have a law background or to know more about finances, as I said. So, you know, it's essential that you need to know what is that you're going to be teaching or facilitating. This takes me to the second point that I think is, I know many of these things might sound obvious, but it's super important that you need to know that. So get to know what is exactly that you're teaching. First of all, what are your learning objectives? It's not the same to be teaching, and I can tell you this, I mean, it's not the same to be teaching someone that is going to be an aspiring board member, someone that you're going to be training from the very beginning, as of someone that has been already a director for some time, right? Or has got a long experience as a director, or someone that you're going to be working for an association or your own company. For instance, I was advising recently and working with one sovereign fund in the Gulf country, in a Gulf country, and they were training their own directors, and they were training aspiring and already active directors, because they found that they wanted to retrain many of those. Well, the learning objectives for each one of the groups was different, as you can imagine. And this is very, very important, because obviously, you know, you need to make you want to make all your teaching activity to be relevant for them. So identify your learning objectives, talk to the executive team. I mean, the people that is been either hiring you, or whoever you're going to be working with and is familiar with the company, or the company or the students that you're going to have, to get to know what are their expectations as well. And then align this as much as possible to either the industry or the company standards. It's not unusual, and I've been living this as well, that there is an association from a specific industry that wants to work with you. If that is the case, again, it's essential that you need to know what are their needs. Okay, what is exactly that they're looking for? What are the standards that they have? Because for some, and this touches with the third point. Depending on the industry, depending on the company, and of course, depending on the country, whenever you're going to be teaching anything related with corporate governance, you need to get familiar with the regulation. Not only the regulation that applies to your specific topic, like in my case, more like sustainability or diversity and inclusion, so on and so forth, or as I said, like board composition, but also in general with the regulation. Because the regulation is going to be telling you a lot about how the country is doing, what kind of boards do they have, what kind of roles are they, I don't know, what kind of roles are mandatory, you know, what is the payment that the directors are going to get getting, you know, what's mandatory, what's not. All this is essential for that. If you don't do so, it might look like you're teaching them something that they already know, or you're teaching them something that you don't know about, right? So get familiar with the regulation, because it's not the same all over. And two other things is like try to get and incorporate current trends and issues, like any information that you can get about yes, exactly, what has been going on around this company or in that industry. Have they been going through specific scandals? Do they want to change the corporate governance standards? Is this something that is critical for them? For instance, I was reading yesterday that Japan is right now going through a specific like global corporate governance refurbishing. Well, if you are going to be working with a Japanese board, I mean, on top of, you know, being able to speak Japanese, if you so, try to get updated with this kind of information, because obviously you need to know about all these things. So, you know, what are the problems they've been facing? I can tell you that we were also working with a car manufacturing company, and that was right after the Volkswagen scandal with the CO2 emissions, and so and obviously they didn't want to know about how to deal with these kind of issues. They didn't know, or they didn't want, neither the company wanted to have us all this into the training, but it was something that it was very present. So we cannot avoid getting into the nitty-gritty, and sometimes, you know, get to know about how not to get involved into the things that you don't want to get involved. But you need to know where are these dark spaces that you don't want to get involved. So incorporate as much as possible either incorporate or get to know all these current issues and trends. And something extremely important is that whenever we work with boards, we need to balance theoretical knowledge with practical applications. If we don't do so, it looks like is the university, you know, we from an academic like super high point of view are teaching them what to do in the real life, and they might feel that they're too far away from our practice. So we need to get into, you know, what is the practical application, involve them into the discussion, and this is something very important. Don't underestimate. This is something that I've learned along the way. At the beginning, when I started teaching corporate governance, because I was fearing that these boards were looking at me or seeing me as someone that didn't have any specific board experience, I tried to avoid going into the theoretical part. Well, forget about that. I mean, our role here is to bring the theoretical part, is to bring research into whatever they do. None of these board members have the possibility, well, it might be, not all of them, okay, I don't want to generalize, but it might be very unlikely that any of them have time to read any paper from Corporate Governance International Review. They don't have the possibility to read anything from Harvard Business Review unless it's something that they've been reading on a flight. So don't hesitate into bringing not only your research, but also whatever kind of theory or theoretical knowledge that you're going to be gathering throughout your experience as a researcher and as a professor into class, without forgetting the practical application, right? And we will see different ways into how to incorporate these practical applications into class. But don't forget about that. I mean, what they want, and especially in my case, I mean, I've been training as well women aspiring board members that happen to be women, okay? Those were a group of women, part of a financial group. What is really interesting is that they were in need of this theoretical knowledge. They wanted to know exactly what is research telling us about quotas, what is research telling us about tokenism, what is all these kind of things that I thought they didn't want to learn. Actually, that was precisely what they wanted to learn from me. So don't hesitate bringing this. And as I said, try to balance your theoretical knowledge with your practical application, or as much as you can think with the practical application, because everything that we do as researchers is also coming with a practical point of view, right? I mean, not only the implications that we write whenever we write a paper, these are exactly what they're looking for, right? Not only our results, our conclusions, but also our practical applications to the topic. If anyone wants to participate, how do I balance these two? Well, what I try to do in everything, what I try to do whenever I have any of these groups is to contact the executive group. I mean, anyone that is the one, either the university or the group that is going to be helping you to get familiar with the students. This is the one that is going to be telling you how much they want to know. Well, not precisely, but they're going to be telling you or giving you a hint on how much they want to have theoretical knowledge or a practical application, right? And you get the flavor of that very soon. I mean, the moment you get to see the roster of students that you have, you really know where that is. Okay, what is that? I mean, of course, you might take it wrong or you might have it wrong, but it's very unlikely. I don't use some specific format. It's more about getting to know who is in the group, what is the goal of this training, what is the profile of the people that is part of this training, and talk as much as possible, as I said, with the executive group. I mean, the executive group meaning the one that has been asking you to teach that course. Okay, so either, I mean, in our case, we have an executive training branch, and those are the ones that usually know everything about the group, and they can tell you what is the kind of information they want to have, right? Well, another way of doing so is that if you've been teaching the same group several times, then you learn by doing, which is not the best way of learning. Well, I mean, it's a very good way of learning, but it's painful, like, because you gather all this information on your, as long as you teach. So, yeah, you learn from failures, if that is correct. What kind of teaching methodologies I've been using? Depending on the group and depending on how long the course is going to be, I try to use different methodologies. Usually, in the case of diversity and inclusion and sustainability, they usually want to have either 1 or 2 sessions, no more than that. When it's something longer, like for instance, anything on board composition and something like this, then we have like longer workshops or sessions. So depending on the type of goal that you're having, then you might go into one or another type of methodology. I really try, and I try super hard to have them involved into everything we do in class. They have a lot of participants of this kind of courses have a lot of tacit knowledge, and the moment you give them the place or the room for them to discuss, they get super activated. I mean, they want to participate and they want to share their critical thinking or their thinking all together. So focusing on, having this kind of interactive kind of business school kind of discussions, I think is very, very enriching if you don't want to go into something more complex. What I try to do with that is to make the conversation to be sparked very soon. So try not to have a conversation out of the blue, right? Like, you can either incorporate a current event and discuss about it, or you have a video and discuss about it, or if you're having an online session, which is something that is happening more and more, try to have these online platforms. Do you have like virtual simulations or social media discussions? Depending on how you have them, the different ways in which you can have these directors, you can use different ways of interacting with them. Keep in mind that they have, the amount of time that they have is very short. So you need to keep them active and participating in class. So relate to everything that they do, incorporate things that are catchy for them. Okay. If you want to go into something more structured, I mean, structured in the way that, you know, you don't want to have a traditional lecture and then have a discussion because you don't know whether this discussion you're going to be able to lead it or to guide it in a nice way. You can go for something more structured. I've been doing case studies and real world cases as well, and both have very interesting, or I've been combining both as well. Either using a traditional case study in class, like you give them the case study in advance and then they discuss that while, you give them everything before class and then they discuss it in class, and that works. However, bear with me, they're not going to be reading that much. Okay, so you either give them short case studies, or you give them longer case studies and then you make a summary of those case studies before having the discussion. This is something that I've been doing in class as well. Like you give them the possible, well, as a wrap up, or as a, I don't know, as a summary for everything we're going to be seeing later. They are super busy. They are, I mean, anyone that is participating in this kind of things is extremely busy. So you need to be practical. It could be great if they had the possibility to be reading 15 pages long cases. The reality is that they don't have the time for that. So give them something short, something that is relevant for the industry or relevant for the company. For instance, I was part of a group of teachers participating in a corporate governance training for a company in Kazakhstan. And it was a telecommunication company, and they really needed to know about the telecommunication industry. So, you know, we use a case study from the telecommunications industry. So to be able to, you know, engage with them and using this as well as a way for them to learn about what was going on in the rest of the world in telecommunications. This is for the case studies. Okay. Can you please recommend that cases? Yes, of course. Something that we have done as well is that whenever we were not able to find case studies relevant for the industry, we were looking for specific governance failures, specific situations in which we saw or we have found that something has not worked. If that is the case, it's super interesting because they try to find, especially things that haven't been working out. Students are trying to find alternative strategies. They know exactly what has been happening, so you're not going to be spoiling the case. But it's really, really good for them to see or to offer different options, right? So you can get to see all these kind of things with the students. So something that is relevant for the industry or for the company is essential there. And something short as well. We were using, for instance, for a stakeholder management analysis, a case that was happening in British Airways some time ago. British Airways and Group Gourmet, I think it was. They were having a big problem at the board because they decided to cut on cost, and then the way they were cutting on cost were not. I think they were not hiring that many people from Group Gourmet, and then Group Gourmet got on went on strike, and that destroyed the whole reputation of British Airways for some time. I mean, there is still, I do still know, and that was happening like 10 years ago, 10 or 15 years ago. I still know executives that are remembering that specific moment, like, you know, British Airways being kind of collapsing all over and how badly that was managed. Well, you know, giving them the possibility to discuss about these kind of things and debate about it is very, very interesting. If you have the possibility to find something, and this relates to a class on stakeholder management as well, if you have the possibility to create some kind of a role-playing game, that's great. Okay. You can simulate a board meeting, changing or giving them different role plays or different actors plays, you know, or each one of them being a different stakeholder. This is the one that we did in this one. Or something that we have done is that we've been using simulations. And I say simulations because we literally just recorded very simple videos on different ethical dilemmas. And then we use them in class as a sparking way of teaching them how to reflect on an ethical issue. So you can, role playing is great. But it requires a lot of work. Okay. And there's something else that it makes role playing a little bit risky, is that it requires everyone participating in the role playing to be active. So if you consider that you have a too big group, or if you see that if there is any risk that you have part of the group that is non-participating, which might happen as well, the role-playing part might be a little bit risky, right? Because we might have, or you might encounter one stakeholder that is not participating. So obviously it's not going to have an impact on any kind of management, for instance. But role-playing and students and all of us, we love it, right? And it's very, very interactive. If I think there is some other, let me see in the chat. How much time do I generally need to prepare like a lecture, like the one on the role playing, Dennis, for instance? Like a couple of days at least. A couple of days. Where do I get these role playing games? I usually design them myself. Yeah, that's the thing. So I find a case study, I identify the different stakeholders, and then I try to write the role for each, or the piece of information that each one of the stakeholders needs to have, and then try to design either the questions or the discussions that they need to go through. Yeah, something, that's what I said, like it requires time. The good news is that once you have done it a couple of times, it works with every single group, and you can repeat it over and over again because it works perfectly every single time. But it takes time. Alternatively, I haven't used this, but I'm pretty sure that if you have a good case study and you're able to write it, and you give ChatGPT the role of each one of the stakeholders, or the piece of information that each one of the stakeholders is going to be playing, it should work much faster. I haven't done it because, ChatGPT has been running for over a year now, but I might be thinking on doing something like this with a different case. I will let you know if I try that, but it might be a nice way of trying to design a role-playing simulation with this. Yeah. So this is another way of doing. Then, the other methodologies that you have on the right-hand side are more related to more traditional ways of learning, I would say. Either having more group projects and, giving them a challenge, and then they can work all together in the group. Trying to solve a challenge that you're giving them, and then presenting all this in class, bringing a guest speaker. We had the possibility to bring, for instance, for this group gourmet case study, we had the possibility to bring to class the CEO of British Airways, the chairperson of British Airways at that time. We recorded everything, obviously, because we didn't know whether we were going to be able to have him ever again. So we were recording everything. This is a nice hint for you. Whenever you bring a guest speaker, record everything, just in case you need to use the video next time you're going to be doing this case. So we were like so lucky to be able to contact this man, and he came to class, and he was explaining how he was solving the whole issue, and how everything actually was not his problem. It was a problem that he inherited from a previous board. But in any case, it was good enough to have, this guest speaker. So if you have an industry professional, or anyone that has been part of the case, or anyone that is being part of a board, especially if you're in charge of an aspiring group, this is the best thing ever, because they, anyone that is this is the best combination of practice and theory that you can create. Okay. And if you have longer time with, or longer courses with this kind of students, try to use either workshops or more like a hands-on session. Okay. For those cases, you need longer time. Okay. You need to have more time with them. For instance, We've been having like a specific skills workshops, and then we've been having like more traditional structure, like giving them more like a theory class, and then having them the possibility to have like more like a software or something like this, or facilitating any of these exercises all together. We've been designing, and this is why I said this augmented reality. We've been designing some kind of augmented reality exercises in which people is changing their bodies. So for them to be able to, understand diversity and inclusion at the board level. So we give them the possibility not only to be role playing or to use the role of someone else, but also to have the possibility to feel as someone else and to have the discussion. This is something that is not straightforward. And it's something that it requires not only time, but a lot of work, and sometimes to pay for that. But if you have the possibility to do something like this, it's great. We had another, like I said this because we give them classes. Another augmented reality, a game that implies that it's been a hurricane in one specific region, and then the board needs to take a strategic decision on what to do with the company after this hurricane. Well, these kind of things are probably something that you cannot do overnight, but if you have the possibility to have, hands-on session, not only like the more like boardroom sessions, but something like they can experience, that's the best thing ever, right, for them. I don't know if you've been using any other type of methodologies or anything else, or no? So what else is that I try to do in order to engage with the audience? Well, as I said, try to understand as much as possible the background of the participants, as much as possible. The more you invest into getting to know who they are, and the better. Okay. Because I happen, for instance, one of the examples that I had is that I happen to have a group that they were mostly engineers, and they speak a totally different language. Coming from a social science background, they speak a totally different language, which is great, right? But it took me a while to be able to understand what is exactly, the kind of data and information that they were needing, and that I couldn't make any kind of a bold statement because I wanted to have everything to be kind of an equation. So teaching or anything related with ethical backgrounds or, like values with this kind of group was a challenge, but they were so eager to learn that once they got engaged, that was super cool. Something very obvious, but I think it's essential, is that we need to set the class rules from the very beginning. Why I say so? They are, as I said, they're extremely busy. Anyone that is participating in any training like this is extremely busy. So they get engaged into phone calls, meetings, they are called out constantly. So whatever is essential for your class, state that from the beginning. If it's a role play and then you have people coming in and out because they need to pick up the phone, there is no way you can do the role playing, right? If we are, I don't know, if you're doing something that is more like a lecture, then maybe, having them going in and out is not an issue. Or, be careful with whether they have their laptops, like whatever is essential for you, set the rules from the very beginning, because otherwise you're going to be very frustrated, and it's going to be frustrating for everyone because first of all, you're not going to be able to get to your learning goals. And on the other hand, there's some people in this group that is eager to learn, and they're not going to be able to learn whatever they are expecting. So set the class rules from the beginning, especially when it comes to cell phones and, all these kind of interactions, right? Encourage participation and be ready for lots of discussions. Like in most cases, we're going to be facilitators here. Unless we teach them something on our research, we're going to be more, facilitators of discussions and gathering all their information. They know a lot. So it's our role as teachers here is to be able to get a flow of this knowledge and to extract all this tacit knowledge that they all have, trying to build into everything that they do. I mean, for all of you who are familiar with MBA students, it's something like this, but in this case, they know what they don't know. So they don't have time to lose. And they have lots of information there. So, you know, you just to fill in, your role is to fill in that gap that they have, okay? And again, provide as many examples as possible. And if they are relevant to the industry, relevant to the company, this is essential for them. It's essential because in most cases, they don't even have the possibility to get to know about the competition. And if they do, they have like the closest competition possible. They don't have information about what is happening in other countries, what is happening in other stock markets, for instance, what is the regulation in different countries. The only thing they know, most of the things that they know is what is happening around them, right? So, yeah, bring all this tacit knowledge and that. Where are the potential drawbacks that we're going to find or that I have found? Especially in the topics that I'm working with. First of all, there's a constant challenge of keeping content up to date. I mean, forget about these classes in which you can repeat everything over and over again. Even when you have a case study that is completely structured and you know everything, you need to know what are the latest movements in the industry or in the market, because otherwise, you're not going to be convincing anyone, right? So that's a very big challenge, because in many cases, the content that needs to be up to date is a very niche one. Okay. We were working with one of the biggest concrete manufacturing companies in the US and Mexico. And although we all know how important is concrete and how important is that for building houses, and how much we have all over, it's not an industry that we are used to see, right? Or at least it's not an industry in which I find myself familiar with. So keeping the content up to date for them, it was a challenge itself, right? As I said again, tailor the content to the region or the industry or the company that you're having. It's a constant challenge to see how far you can go into any of these topics. And you will see this the moment you've been teaching this group a couple of sessions. You need to know exactly how far you can go or how much time you have to go deep enough or not. Sometimes you can work on one specific topic because this is precisely what the company wants, what the board wants, and you have like long time to be working on that. In most cases, you're not going to have that much time to work on anything or nothing. So you need to be to the point, but you need to constantly think whether you want to go deep or not. Keep in mind that although most of the people that you're going to have at the board are going to be probably following or looking or having a similar profile, there are some of them that are not going to be. So for instance, in that group in this board that I told you that most of them were engineers, I had a couple of lawyers. Welcome diversity. It was a total disaster to be able to have them both participating, both groups participating. So, I mean, I think we managed that and we were working on that. But, if you have a couple of lawyers together with a bunch of engineers, breathe deeply and, have a lot of patience, because you need to have them all on board. So you need to be very sure about all the problems that they are going to find as minorities in functional minority in that sense, and how difficult most likely it's going to be for them to participate on that. Something that I haven't told in here, and now that I'm thinking about, is that we found another challenge, another potential challenge, is that in one training session that we had, in a couple of training sessions that we had, they were combining executives and independent directors. The interest the interest, the knowledge, and the profiles of each one of them were totally different. The information about the company was totally different. I mean, the executives obviously knew everything about the company, and the challenge for them, or the challenge for us with them, was that they were going into the detail. They were constantly or they had the temptation to go and micromanage whatever we were doing there. Whereas the independent directors, they were more like looking at everything from more from an upper point of view, from a more like, long-term oriented view. And that was another challenge, to try to combine these two into one discussion. Any recommendations for teaching short sessions? Yes, go to the point. Go exactly to try to find the learning objective that they have, and try to tailor this as much as possible. As I said, they don't have time to go, for instance, I mean, we usually, either if you are like, flipping the classroom, we as professors tend to have like, the same structure. So we usually give them the theory, and then we go into a little bit of practice, and then you conclude the session, or you do a wrap up. Well, if you are working with this kind of executives and you only have like an hour and 20 minutes or 2 hours, so to speak, you need to go directly into the discussion. So go to the point, try to have as much time as possible working with them, not like providing them your knowledge. Okay, try to bring your knowledge into the discussion, maybe, discussing with them, trying, make them not only participants, but make them like the critical actors into everything that you're going to be learning here. Okay, they are the most important parts of this. And then be ready, and especially if you have like, you're going to have vocal directors. Okay, so be ready to face resistance to change. We as researchers, as educators, we face this resistance to change. But if you've been teaching undergrads, that's not a big issue. Like, undergrads are digesting mostly everything we give them. If you're teaching MBAs, depending on the topic, there is some resistance. If you're teaching executives and executives or directors, and you're teaching them how they have to behave next, it's not going to work. And the resistance there is immense, especially in my case. I sometimes have been teaching, this group of some groups of directors, unconscious biases. Well, not about, or training to avoid unconscious biases. The underlying message that some of them are getting is like, you are blaming us for being biased and for taking biased decisions, which I try not to go into that direction. Obviously, I try to avoid that, but this is the message that they are getting. We need to go into this training because we've been doing something wrong before. Well, obviously for these people, the resistance is immense. However, the moment you get them talking, and the moment you get into the flow of how we all learn, how we all live, right? I mean, how much of an interactive session this needs to be, the more they get involved. Excuse me. Super important to be on time. They don't have time for anything else. So if the session, I know these kind of things are very obvious, but if you fail into something very small with these kind of groups, you fail dramatically, right? So for instance, if you're given a window of 120 minutes for them to be taught whatever, or to be discussing whatever, this is the time that you have, no more, no less. If you give them less, they have the perception that they're not receiving everything they've been paid for, or everything that they deserve, or they haven't been looking for. I mean, remember that the most scarce resource for this group is time. So you need to give them everything in this time, but you cannot go farther than that. You cannot stay longer than that, because they have meetings assigned or scheduled. They have phone calls that are going to be receiving in this 10 minutes, a half of a break. So be careful to keep everything very much in the time that is being given to you. And as well, be careful with information overload. Don't give them everything you have. I mean, just focus into something, one topic, 2 topics, whatever are your learning objectives. And I come back to the first point. Whatever is required, just go for that, teach that, and don't try to give them everything about corporate governance. And the other thing is that usually you're not going to be the only one teaching these courses. Someone else is going to be co-teaching with you or teaching them. In my case, for instance, all the finance part is taught by someone else. So if you have someone else teaching this, try to coordinate as much as possible with this one. Okay, what is the content that each one of them, because overlaps in these kind of groups are not well received, to be very nice. No. They don't have time to lose, right? And to finish with everything is that teaching as a minority, teaching as a minority meaning like a woman teaching. We all can have this discussion on whether women are minorities or not, blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to direction, to a board of directors, still women are minorities. So teaching as a minority is a challenge in itself. Okay. Sometimes because they don't see you as a professional on that field. So sometimes because they are expecting someone that is with a different profile. Someone that is older, someone that is a man, in many cases. Well, the main role of we as educators, as educators, is to make use of what we know. And in our case, or the main tool that I have used is the research and all the findings and all the conclusions and all my background in there. You don't need to prove anyone that you're a good educator. You don't need to teach, you don't need to convince anyone about how good you are. You've been researching on this, you know the field. So use what you've been doing, okay? Don't pretend to be someone else, because at least in my case, I've never been a chairperson. I'm part of different boards, but as a director, so I'm not. It's not like never in a listed company or anything like this. So you need to be humble, help them into the topics that you can help them, but considering yourself as someone that is going to be specifically helping them in one niche point or one specific point. That's it. Okay, so keep it strict to that. And I think this is it. That was essentially what I wanted to tell you. I think I've been a little bit over time.
Thank you, Patricia. I think you've been perfect. You've been taking questions. I think we have a few more questions in the chat. How would you deal with the interdisciplinary nature of corporate governance? Any recommendations on how to tailor lectures for that?
I try not to give them a specific lectures. Like, as I said, I usually try like pieces of news or articles that I find on the media, or things that are short enough for them to be able to understand what is going on, right? But I try not to give them the paper itself. As I said, probably the longest they are going to be reading is something from Harvard Business Review. This is the longest they will read. So this being said, if they ask, because they might have interest into something specific, you can give them the paper, you can indicate the paper, you obviously need to reference the paper that you've been working on, but that's it, no more than that. When it comes to interdisciplinary nature, as I said, try to coordinate yourself with the experts on that field. In my case, as I said, like auditing is far away from my field, okay, very far away. I'm not sure if I would be able ever to advise anyone on auditing, anything on auditing, on the auditing part of a board. However, I have amazingly good colleagues that can do so. And we can coordinate very easily. We speak the same language, we are able to do so. So I can introduce the topics that I'm not familiar with, that I'm not an expert on, and then my colleagues are going to be dealing with the rest of that. This is how I deal with interdisciplinary. I don't feel comfortable teaching something that I'm not an expert on, unless I tell them so, right? I'm learning with you, right? This is it, right?
Any books you would suggest for like
any books? Interesting. I don't use that many books. I essentially use more like, more like papers. Yeah, and I usually go for the topic that I want to go for. Like, I'm not sure, I mean, given the interdisciplinary approach of corporate governance, I'm not sure whether we can have a book that is going to be covering everything in this sense. Oh, panel discussions, Niels, and them, I'll get to you in a second. Panel discussions, you mean like role-playing or panel discussions online? Because I've been using both.
Can I just make a remark?
Sure.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Patricia. Very, very interesting. Now, I was just wondering what you exactly meant by this, because in the past I've been using this myself, but then I just asked students to prepare something like a proposition, and then they had to defend themselves. Is that what you mean? Can you just share your, let's say, your
This
experience
one, what I meant with panel discussions was bringing different individuals, like different experts on the field, and then to have a discussion among them from the different sides. Okay, but I've been doing something very similar, as you said, Niels. Especially during the pandemic, we were having discussions online, and we were giving them more like a role-playing activity, but we were using a platform for them to discuss. Okay, what has been my experience with that? I found that very interesting for me as a researcher. I found this very difficult for them as participants. I think it was requiring, I was expecting too much, or that requires a big time commitment from their side. But that was my experience. I didn't see this working that well. But that's, I mean, maybe I didn't do it. And because I was not happy with that the first time I tried, I didn't try again, but maybe I did it wrong.
Well, I don't know why, but no, but I think it's interesting to try this out. When you mentioned this in your slides, I was thinking maybe this is something that I want to try again.
Yeah.
Because when I asked it many years ago, it actually worked because students are triggered to think about something and then come up with a position. And even though they might not subscribe to the position itself, they still have to defend it. And then they have to prepare their own, based upon articles or something. So maybe that's a good idea.
Yeah,
so
I've been using this for I've been using this for stakeholder management. But I prefer to do this like face to face more than online. I mean, online I didn't find that enriching, so to speak. But it could be that now it works better.
Yeah, teaching online is a problem in itself, right?
Yeah, so. It is.
Thank you very much, Patricia.
Thank you, Niels.
Didem, you wanted to ask a question?
Hi everyone, this is Didem Gündoğdu from Queen Mary University of London. Actually, Neil partly asked what I wanted to ask about the role play in corporate governance, in teaching corporate governance, because I teach a postgraduate module, corporate governance at postgraduate level. And this is something I've been intending to incorporate into my teaching for some time. But as you said, because you didn't find it very productive, or you think
no, I did.
I
did it. Not online.
Not online.
I found it extremely productive in class.
Right.
When I was doing this online, these panel discussions online, I didn't have that much of a good experience. Yeah.
Right, because usually we get the black screen, right?
Yeah.
So I think it would be interesting to see, and also it's for other colleagues as well too. I would be very happy if they could share their experiences and reflect upon their practice, especially at postgraduate level. I think stimulating board meetings would be very useful in understanding how actually board dynamics play when it comes to decision making. So that was my question. Thank you very much.
I think what you can try to, well, what I've tried to do when I've been using these cases is to identify the different stakeholders, and then have the board not working as a board. So, I mean, I was not trying to simulate a board discussion. I was trying to simulate the different stakeholders within the board. Okay, within the board that I already had. So different directors or aspiring directors, I mean, they were not working in the same board. In this case, they were taking the role of each one of the stakeholders. So for instance, in this example that I told you about group gourmet, we were having one group that it was British Airways, another group that it was the UK government that was really very much involved. We had another one, a couple of groups working from group gourmet, the unions. So if you are identifying the different stakeholders and you're able to give them instructions, then it works really well. So you give them a trigger, a discussion point, and then they start working super well. But as I said, like, it takes time. It's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. We have time for one last question, if anybody wants.
Nice. How many of you have been teaching corporate governance, if I may? Okay, excellent. So many. So you have, yeah.
Patricia, if I may ask,
Sure.
You mentioned about the course updating, that it's a constant challenge, and I thought maybe you want to wrap up this very interesting session by giving us advice. How often should we be updating our courses? Is it just the examples, or do you see also value in some of the topics within corporate governance that need updating, perhaps?
Assuming that you're teaching the same topic, you want to make sure that you are updating at least the examples. Not all of them, but at least you have like the most updated examples in your presentation or in your discussion. If you're teaching something slightly different, be careful not to use something that is being done for something else. I explain myself with this. If you're teaching sustainability and for some reason they have you to teach, or they have you to teach something on diversity and inclusion, although that is part of the S, be careful that you don't reuse the same presentation. It's very, very risky with this kind of groups, very risky, because they, as I said, like, they want exactly what they want to do. So how much you need to update that? Well, you need to make sure that what you have in your presentation, what you have in your knowledge is relevant for them, and that you have the most updated examples or discussions or challenges in the industry or for the company altogether.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Right.
Yeah, thank you so much, Patricia. With this, we are right on time.
Thank you.
I cannot thank you enough. I think we have all had a super inspiring session. So many. Thank you for not only sharing your experience, but all these really inspiring and wonderful methodologies.
Thank you.
Definitely taking away a lot. Yeah, definitely many of us, I think, will be now trying this role-playing simulations. And
excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, have a great afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are. Okay.
Thank you
very
everybody
much.
also
Thank
for
you.
joining. Until next time, have a nice evening.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.